Welcome, aware, inda,
Humbalang.
molo, sobona,
Hukanda.
and a warm welcome to the Induvo Knowledge Cast, the podcast where your curiosity meets insightful conversations. Namuzivi ko amba, a liquor discussion about something that affects all of us, employee benefits. We're diving deep into the world of International Accounting Standard 19, or IAS 19 as it's known in the finance world. It might sound dry, but trust me, it's juicier than a Sunday pachi when you think about how it impacts everything from your payslip to the stability of those big companies you see on the JSE.
That's right, you see. IAS 19 sets a global standard for how companies report their employee benefits, from those short-term hooks like leave and bonuses to those long-term commitments like retirement plans. Think of it like a universal language for businesses around the world, including right here in Mzansi, to speak clearly about what they're offering their workforce.
So it's not just about crunching numbers in some dusty boardroom. It actually has a real impact on us, the average South Africans.
Absolutely. Imagine you're thinking about investing in a company. You want to know they're managing their finances responsibly, right? Well, IAS 19 ensures they're being upfront about those employee benefits, which can be a huge part of their overall costs. It helps paint a clearer picture of their financial health.
Makes sense.
Yep.
So this IAS 19, it's not just some recent invention.
You're sharp. It actually has a bit of history. The first version came out back in 1998, and it's been tweaked and updated several times since then in 2004, 2011, 2013, and most recently in 2018.
That's like adding new spices to the pachi as times change. So before we go any further, can we break down exactly what falls under this employee benefits umbrella? I mean, are we talking about everything from the free coffee in the staff kitchen to those big retirement packages everyone dreams of?
Not quite the coffee, but you're on the right track. IAS 19 covers a pretty wide range of what companies provide for their people. Think about it. There's your salary, of course, then things like annual leave, sick leave, and even those bonuses you might get for a job well done. Those are all considered short-term benefits.
So that's where my annual leave fits in.
Precisely.
Okay.
Now, in South Africa, we have a big focus on post-employment benefits, especially those retirement plans like pension funds and medical aid contributions. These are the things people really start thinking about as they get closer to retirement.
Yeah, those are definitely hot topics at any family gathering.
You know it. Then you've got other long-term benefits that kick in after you've been with a company for a while. Things like long service leave or even a special bonus for reaching a milestone anniversary. Of course, there are termination benefits, which come into play when someone leaves the company, like retrenchment packages, for example.
Okay, that paints a pretty clear picture. It's not just about the golden handshake at the end. It's about the whole journey, from day one to even after you've left the company. Now, I know you're going to explain this really well, but can we tackle those two big elephants in the room? Defined contribution and defined benefit plans. I know they're crucial to understand, but to be honest, they always make my head spin a bit.
I hear you. They can be tricky, but let's try to demystify them. Think of it like planning a big family braai with a defined contribution plan. You're bringing your own meat each month. You know exactly how much you're putting in. But the size of your feast depends on how well your meat performs on the braai. Maybe you get a perfect sear and everyone's happy. Or maybe it gets a little overcooked. You get the picture.
Makes sense. So, with a defined contribution plan, you're responsible for your contributions, and the outcome depends on how well those investments do.
Right.
But what about those defined benefit plans? Is that like someone promising you a full plate regardless of how much meat you bring?
Spot on. With a defined benefit plan, the company promises you a specific payout in retirement based on a set formula. It usually takes into account things like your salary and years of service. So it's more like they're saying, relax, we've got the braai covered, you'll get your fair share.
So, in that case, the company's taking on the risk of making sure there's enough food for everyone at the braai.
Exactly. They're responsible for making sure there are enough funds to meet that promise, even if the market throws a few curveballs. It's like guaranteeing there will always be enough borns, no matter what. Of course, there are pros and cons to both types of plans for both the employee and the company, which we can unpack a bit later.
Now, here's where things get even more interesting and potentially confusing. What happens when we add those multi-employer plans and state plans to the mix? It sounds like a whole lot of people crowding around the braai, each with their own tongs and ideas.
That's a great way to put it. Multi-employer plans are exactly that. Multiple companies pooling their resources together, like different families coming together for a big neighborhood braai.
Hmm.
This can be a defined contribution or benefit plan, and IAS 19 helps determine how each company accounts for its share of the costs. State plans, on the other hand, are like the government stepping in to provide some basic pap and wars for everyone, regardless of which family braai they belong to.
Ah, so it's like everyone's contributing to the feast in different ways. But I can imagine things getting pretty complicated when it comes to figuring out who brought what and how much everyone should get.
You know it, especially with multi-employer plans. Things can get a bit murky if everyone isn't being completely transparent about what they're putting in. It's like trying to figure out who brought the drawers when there are 10 coolers at the braai.
Yeesh. That sounds like a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
How does IAS 19 help companies navigate this accounting maze?
Well, if a company can't clearly show how much they've contributed to a multi-employer plan, because maybe the records are a bit messy, IAS 19 says, treat it like a defined contribution plan. This means each company just reports on the money they put in, rather than trying to calculate their share of the final braai spread. But transparency is key. Everyone needs to be upfront about the fact that it's actually a defined benefit plan, but they just don't have enough info to break it down further.
Makes sense. No hiding behind a mountain of mileys. Especially here in South Africa, where we have these big industry-wide pension funds, transparency is crucial.
Absolutely. Now, while figuring out who brought what to the braai might seem relatively straightforward, defined benefit plan accounting requires some serious financial firepower. And at the heart of this is the concept of actuarial assumptions.
Actuarial assumptions. Okay, those are two words guaranteed to make my eyes glaze over. I always picture a bunch of mathematicians huddled over spreadsheets trying to predict the future, but I know they're important, so please, break it down for us. Why are these assumptions so vital in the grand scheme of things?
You see, remember that we've got the braai-covered promise that comes with a defined benefit plan. To figure out how much money the company needs to set aside each year to actually deliver on that promise, they need to make some educated guesses about the future. That's where actuarial assumptions come in. It's like using those braai tongs to carefully turn the bar work, trying to predict how much everyone will eat and when they'll be full.
So, it's about predicting things like how long people will live, how much their salaries will grow, and how much money those investments will make.
You got it. It's like trying to guess how many bags of charcoal you'll need for the braai. If you underestimate, you might run out before everyone's steak is cooked.
I'm starting to see why those assumptions are so critical. If those guesses are even slightly off, it could have a massive impact on the company's finances.
Right, absolutely. It's like realizing you need to buy a whole lot more Borworks than you initially planned. It can throw your budget out the window. And that's why IAS 19 stresses the importance of using unbiased and compatible assumptions. You don't want to be overly optimistic or pessimistic. You want to be realistic about what the future holds.
No. We've been talking a lot about the costs involved, the money the company needs to set aside. But what about the actual money in the plan? The braai fund, so to speak. That's where those plan assets come in.
Right. You're catching on quickly. Plan assets are the investments held by the benefit plan, the actual money that's working hard to make that braai happen. This could include things like shares in companies, bonds, even property, basically anything that can generate a return. And IAS 19 has specific guidelines for how these assets are valued and reported.
No. Things are starting to sound a bit more complicated. I imagine it's not always easy to put an exact value on things like property, especially when the market is up and down like a yo-yo.
You're absolutely right. It's not as simple as checking the price tag on a pack of worse. Determining the fair value of these assets can be quite complex, especially when you consider things like market fluctuations and different types of investments. Then you've got things like qualifying insurance policies and reimbursement rights, which add another layer of complexity.
Well, hold on. You're saying insurance policies can be considered plan assets?
In some cases, yes. If the policy is specifically designed to pay out benefits under the plan and is protected from the company's creditors, it can be treated as part of that braai fund. It's like having a backup plan in case the main fire goes out.
That's pretty clever. So it's like having a gas braai on standby just in case load shedding hits. But this all highlights how crucial transparency is.
Right. Absolutely. Companies need to be open about what they're doing with those plan assets and how they're managing the risks involved.
Transparency, unbiased assumptions, understanding those plan assets. It sounds like companies have a lot to juggle when it comes to IAS 19.
And we haven't even touched on the reporting and disclosure requirements yet.
Now that you mention it, I was wondering how all this information actually gets communicated to people like me. Because let's be honest, Most of us don't exactly spend our weekends reading through company financial statements.
You and me both. But that's where the show and tell part of IAS 19 comes in. The reporting and disclosure requirements.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Tell me more about how this whole reporting thing works.
Think of it like this IAS 19 requires companies to lay all their cards on the table when it comes to employee benefits. They can't just say, trust us, we've got this. They need to show their calculations, explain their assumptions, and be upfront about the risks involved. It's all about building trust and ensuring everyone understands what's happening with those hard-earned benefits.
Yeah. It's like giving us a peek behind the curtain to see how the sausage gets made, so to speak.
Yeah.
But does this mean I need to suddenly become a financial whiz to understand my pension statement?
Not at all. While the underlying calculations can be complex, IAS 19 emphasizes clear and concise disclosures that anyone can understand. Imagine it like a well-organized recipe book. Instead of throwing a bunch of ingredients together, you get step-by-step instructions that even a novice cook can follow.
Okay, that makes me feel a bit better.
Yeah.
So what kind of information are we talking about here? Is it just a summary of those calculations we discussed, or does it go deeper than that?
It's much more than just a summary. Companies need to break things down for us, showing their work every step of the way. Remember those actuarial assumptions we talked about earlier? Well, companies can't just say, we assume salaries will grow by 5%. They need to explain why they've chosen that specific percentage, perhaps based on historical trends or economic forecasts. They also need to show how they arrived at the final numbers for their defined benefit obligations, highlighting things like service costs, interest expenses, and how much they've actually paid out in benefits.
So it's like a detailed financial roadmap, showing all the twists and turns those benefits have taken throughout the year.
Precisely. And to make things even more interesting, companies also need to provide something called a sensitivity analysis. This is where they explore those what-if scenarios.
Ah, so this is where those risk factors we discussed earlier come into play. It's like asking, what if the market takes a nosedive, or inflation goes through the roof?
Exactly. The sensitivity analysis shows how the plan's financial position could change if those key assumptions turn out to be a bit off. For example, what if the actual return on those plan assets is way lower than the company predicted? The sensitivity analysis would show the potential impact on the plan's funding level and how much the company might need to contribute in the future.
It's like a stress test for the plan, making sure it can handle a bit of rough weather. But speaking of stressful situations, let's circle back to those multi-employer plans, those accounting potchis where transparency can be a bit of a challenge. Does IAS 19 have anything to say about how they should be reported?
You bet. Even if a company can't provide a complete breakdown of its share of the plan's obligations, because maybe the records are a bit jumbled, they still need to be upfront about the funding arrangements, any minimum contribution requirements, and how they handle those surpluses or deficits.
No hiding behind a mountain of pap. Now, what about those situations where different companies under the same parent company share the risks of a plan? How does IAS 19 deal with that?
Those are tricky, but IAS 19 has some guidelines for those situations as well. Essentially, they need to be treated as related party transactions, with each company disclosing its contribution policy and the overall impact of the plan.
So it's all about making sure everything is out in the open, no matter how complex the arrangements might be.
Exactly. And let's not forget about those all-important future cash flows. Companies need to outline their funding strategies, how they plan to keep the money flowing into the plan. They need to be upfront about how much they expect to contribute in the coming year, and even provide a timeline for when those benefits are likely to be paid out.
That makes sense. Investors and employees need to know that the money will be there when they need it. But all of this talk about reporting and disclosures, is it just for the benefit of companies and investors? Where do we, the everyday South Africans, fit into all of this?
That's a great question. Remember, IAS 19 is all about creating a more transparent and accountable system for employee benefits. And who benefits the most from that? You guessed it, the employees themselves.
So it's not just about making sure companies are playing by the rules. It's about empowering us, the people who rely on these benefits.
Precisely. When you have access to clear and concise information about your benefits, you're in a much better position to make informed decisions about your financial future. You can plan for retirement with more confidence, knowing that your savings are being managed responsibly and that you have a clear understanding of what you can expect down the line.
That peace of mind is worth a lot, especially in these uncertain times. But let's be honest, reading through company financial statements isn't exactly how most people want to spend their free time. So, how can companies make this information more accessible and engaging for their employees?
That's where things like annual benefit statements and retirement planning workshops come in. These tools can help translate those complex financial reports into something that's easy to understand and relevant to your personal situation.
Ah, so IAS 19 is more than just a set of rules and regulations. It's about creating a dialogue between companies and their employees, helping people understand their benefits and plan for their future.
Exactly. And this dialogue is especially important in South Africa, where financial literacy levels can vary widely. By providing clear and accessible information, companies can empower their employees to take control of their financial well-being.
Yeah. We've spent a lot of time talking about post-employment benefits,
Hmm.
especially those retirement plans. But IAS 19 doesn't stop there, does it? What about those other long-term benefits we talked about earlier, like long service leave and even those termination benefits?
You're absolutely right. IS 19 covers a wide spectrum of employee benefits, recognizing that companies need to account for all sorts of long-term commitments and potential payouts.
Yeah. Even though these benefits might not be as complex as a defined benefit pension plan, they still need to be accounted for accurately and transparently.
Precisely. For those long-term benefits like long service leave, companies can use a slightly simplified version of the accounting principles used for post-employment benefits. This means they don't need to go through the whole process of calculating actuarial gains and losses and reporting them separately.
It's like recognizing that these benefits are a bit more predictable, a bit less like trying to guess how much borers will disappear in a braai.
Exactly. But it doesn't mean companies can just take a casual approach. They still need to carefully consider the timing of those benefits, how much they might cost in the future, and how to reflect those costs in their financial statements.
So it's still about careful planning,
Yeah.
accurate measurement,
Hmm.
and transparent disclosure.
You got it. But those termination benefits now, those can be a bit of a wild card, especially in today's uncertain economic climate.
I can imagine. With companies restructuring and people changing jobs more frequently, it's hard to predict when those termination benefits might come into play.
That's where things get a bit more challenging from an accounting perspective. Companies need to figure out when to recognize the liability for those potential payouts, how to measure those liabilities, and how to disclose all of this in their financial statements. I'm guessing there are specific criteria that companies need to meet before they can start setting aside money for those potential termination benefits. They can't just say, well, we might have to let some people go in the future, so let's just put some money aside, just in case.
You're absolutely right. IAS 19 says a company can only recognize the liability for termination benefits when they can no longer withdraw the offer of those benefits or when they're actively planning a restructuring that involves termination benefits.
So it's not just a vague idea. It needs to be a concrete plan with clear actions and timelines.
Precisely. And that plan needs to be detailed, outlining things like the number of employees affected, what kind of jobs they do, when the restructuring is expected to be completed, and the specific benefits that will be offered. Once that plan is in motion, the company needs to figure out how to measure the liability, taking into account factors like the type of benefits offered, whether they'll be paid out as a lump sum or over time, and the all-important discount rate. Okay, I'm sensing a recurring theme here. Careful planning, accurate measurement, and transparent disclosure. It seems like that's the golden thread running through all of IAS 19.
You've hit the nail on the head. Whether we're talking about those long service leave rewards or those potentially tricky termination benefits, IAS 19 sets the stage for a more transparent and accountable approach to managing all types of employee benefits.
And that benefits everyone in the long run. Companies, investors, and most importantly, the employees themselves. But let's bring this back home for a moment. We've talked about IAS 19 as this global accounting standard. But what's its specific relevance for South African companies and employees?
Well, let's not forget that South Africa is part of the global economy. Our companies are competing on an international stage, and investors are constantly evaluating their financial health. Having a standardized way to report on employee benefits, like the one provided by IAS 19, is crucial for attracting investment and building trust in our businesses.
It's like speaking a language that everyone understands, making it easier for investors to compare companies from different countries.
Exactly. And it's not just about attracting foreign investment. Local investors and stakeholders also benefit from this transparency. They can make more informed decisions about where to invest their money and how to manage their own savings and retirement planning.
And let's not forget about the employees. They're the ones who ultimately benefit from well-managed plans. Knowing that their retirement savings are being handled responsibly and that they understand their benefits provides peace of mind and financial security.
Absolutely. It's about building a system where everyone feels confident and secure about their financial future.
Now, beyond the purely financial aspects, I can't help but think about the concept of Ubuntu. It seems like IAS 19 aligns with that spirit of shared responsibility and interconnectedness.
You're absolutely right. Ubuntu emphasizes the importance of community and looking out for each other. And when it comes to employee benefits, that sense of shared responsibility is vital. It's not just about companies fulfilling their legal obligations. It's about creating a culture of care and ensuring everyone has a fair shot at a comfortable retirement.
It's about recognizing that we're all in this together. And by working together, we can create a system that benefits everyone.
Precisely. IAS 19 provides the framework for a more transparent and accountable system, one that fosters trust and encourages open dialogue between companies and their employees. And in the spirit of Ubuntu, that open dialogue is essential for building a more equitable and prosperous society for all South Africans.
Well said. It seems like we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into the world of IAS 19. We've explored its history, its scope, the complexities of different types of benefit plans, and the crucial role of transparency and disclosure. But as we wrap up this discussion, I can't help but wonder, what does the future hold for employee benefits in South Africa?
That's a great question, and it's one that many experts are grappling with right now, you see. South Africa faces some unique challenges and opportunities when it comes to employee benefits. We have a young and growing population, a dynamic economy with its own set of uncertainties, and a constant need to adapt to global trends.
So with all these moving parts, what are some of the key things we should be watching out for when it comes to the future of employee benefits here in South Africa?
One of the biggest factors is our changing demographics. We have a relatively young population, and many young people are entering the workforce in non-traditional ways. Think gig workers, freelancers, and entrepreneurs. This raises some interesting questions about how traditional employee benefits, like those defined benefit pension plans, will need to adapt.
So we're trying to fit a square bri grid onto a round fire pit. The traditional models might need some adjustments to accommodate this new landscape.
Exactly. And then there's the economic climate. South Africa is facing slow growth, high unemployment, and the ever-present challenge of load shedding. These factors can impact investment strategies for those plan assets, making it even more important for companies to be savvy and manage risks carefully.
And those actuarial assumptions we discussed earlier, they become even more critical in these uncertain times, don't they? Trying to predict things like life expectancy and salary growth when the economic ground is constantly shifting. It's a tough job.
It is. It's like trying to plan a braai when you don't know if you'll have enough charcoal or if the weather will cooperate.
Yes.
But even with these challenges, there are also exciting opportunities on the horizon. We might see a shift towards more flexible benefit packages, ones that cater to the needs of a diverse workforce with different needs and priorities.
I'm thinking things like portable retirement plans that move with you from job to job, benefits tailored for gig workers, and even financial wellness programs that empower employees to take control of their financial futures. It's about recognizing that one size doesn't fit all.
Absolutely. And technology is playing an increasingly important role. Fintech solutions could revolutionize how we access and manage our benefits, making the whole process more user-friendly and efficient. Imagine being able to track your retirement savings, adjust your investment strategy, and even access financial advice all through a simple app on your phone.
That would be a game changer. It sounds like there's a lot to be excited about, even with the challenges we're facing.
Yeah.
So, as we wrap up this deep dive into the world of IAS 19, what's the one key takeaway you'd like our listeners to walk away with?
I think the most important message is this: engage, ask questions, and take ownership of your benefits. Don't be afraid to ask your employer or your pension fund for clarification. Read those annual benefit statements, attend those workshops, and educate yourself about how your benefits work. After all, it's your financial future we're talking about.
Wise words. It's like knowing how to braai the perfect steak. You need the right tools, the right techniques, and a bit of knowledge to get the best results. And remember, in the spirit of Ubuntu, we're all responsible for creating a system that supports financial well-being and a sense of shared prosperity.
Exactly. It's about working together to build a future where everyone has the opportunity to thrive.
Thank you for joining us on this Lecker discussion. We've explored the intricate world of IAS 19, from its history and scope to the nuances of defined benefit plans, the importance of transparency, and the exciting possibilities that lie ahead. Until next time, stay curious, keep asking questions, and remember that knowledge is power when it comes to securing your financial future.